to speculate about
Recording is on.
New Gaia could be. So what if there was a microorganism that emitted light in the oceans, you know, in the form of bioluminescence, which already exists, and that light was so intense that it radiated out of Earth and it cooled Earth? I mean, the physics of it probably is completely wrong, but we can dream because, you know, 3.5 billion years ago, this microorganism called a blue-green algae actually gave rise to oxygen. This tiny little thing that you can't even see with your eye is what gave us oxygen, and how you have these trees, these green trees. So the power of life forms and biological life forms can shape the planet. And this is what happened to Earth. It gave us an atmosphere of, what is it, 20% oxygen, 80% nitrogen. And it gave us human civilization. And now it gave us the Anthropocene, which is the end of that era and the beginning of a kind of clean slate, I guess, sixth mass extinction event.
Yeah, I think this is always the sort of positive way to look at this whole disaster that we've contributed towards, you know, I mean, God knows when it started, when we started clearing the land and we started burning fires. I don't know how far you want to go back. Some people say that, you know, the pre-industrial, the 1700s, I suppose, or 1600s. But if you look at it at this kind of macro or zoom out view, you know, Earth has always gone through huge cycles, and we're just another product of Earth. We're another creature that lives here. But this idea that we always have that we somehow, like, we're damaging the planet and that we can save Earth, and it's like, no, Earth's going to be just fine. Like, Earth has gone through these huge hothouse rapid climatic changes, as Lovelock detailed in many of his work, and the other climate scientists, you can see from the ice cores. So, you know, it goes through these stages, and there's huge die-offs, as you say, of the microbiota or whatever in that period when all the photosynthesizers came about. So, yeah, I mean, we can't, you know, it really gets on my nerves when the Greens, you know, try to make it seem like they're holier than thou and that they can, you know, they're somehow better than everyone else because they've got the ideas to save the earth, save the animals, just all this rewilding, all these projects. And I think it's just a way of making us feel better about ourselves, you know. Yeah.
Earth will save itself. Trust me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, there's a little lull. It's a good sign. There's been a lot of deep stuff discussed there. I was thinking about coming back onto what we were talking at the start about the I was going to say our unique self-awareness or not in this universe, even when we talk about other planets, even when we talk about, you know, I'm still it's something that's very much on my mind. I'm not thinking about, oh, what's my purpose? I'm not into that sort of thing. I'm just thinking how the beauty of the human, the wonderful beauty of the human too. And I kind of think that there would be a form of mourning, grieving the disappearance of humans. And I think the hope of survival of a few is a great thing. I think we have emphasized that in our group, and we've talked about that a lot. And what would anybody want to share something about this?
Well, can people hear me? Hello?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you, Jason.
Yeah. So You know, I'm first of all, George, thank you again for being a part of this. I think our group, Lord Hughs group, is special because we're not just talking about climate, abrupt climate change, economic collapse, social collapse, etc., but really trying to figure out and look at, gain perspective on how we got here. When was the turn? And earlier discussion, when you talked about the breaking of the mirror, you know, at some point, I think Gary, who's a regular member, commented last session that perhaps the alien cortex is our first transhumanist moment. And I think I've been thinking about that, and that may be similar to your observation of, you know, the breaking of the mirror. At some point, we began reflecting or able to tell a story about ourselves. And so you think of that first, you know, we illustrated art on caves about the previous hunt, either as instruction or as reflection, and we improved our methods of hunting and created artifice so that we could hunt better, surplus, gain surplus. You would have to imagine, say, the equivalent would be a group of lions getting together and saying, how about that last wildebeest? How about that last meal that we had? That was pretty fantastic, wasn't it? Or even great apes, our closest relatives, getting together and say, how about those shoots of bamboo that we were able to get, or eucalyptus or whatever in the highlands of Rwanda that they eat. And we don't think that they do that. We can't know. We don't know that elephants or the other smartest higher mammals, whales, we don't know that they don't do this, but we don't think they do so in the same way. And we've had, in those times, it's pretty clear that since, if you take Lord Hughs' historiography, if you take Yuval Noah Harari's somewhat slightly different, but not completely different historiography, where, you know, he ends it very irritatingly with the celebration of transhumanism. Lord Hugh did not. But you look at our dilemma, you know, at what point, here we are. I felt like there should be a Greek chorus. You are Greek, you're in the cradle of civilization. And when you were observing that we have done all these things and we're now communicating via technology over great distance on a planetary scale, I felt like the chorus, the Greek chorus, if it were here, would be saying, and we still don't know why we are here. We still don't know why we are here. To have built all of this and to have watched the Greek civilization arise, ancient Greek civilization arise, and then be destroyed by other empires and by other forces. The Etruscan, the great unknown Etruscan Empire that gave way, that plus Greek influences gave rise to Rome. We've had these empires decline, and in most cases it was over war for resources or decline of resources. So that is happening again, but now on a planetary scale. And I'm just reflecting that original mirror break, that original, you know, if it is the alien cortex, if that's the metaphor, that's Hugh's metaphor, we were in small groups at that time. Our brain is geared to deal with the human problems of about 150 people, Dunbar's number, maybe 300. And we find that when we look at Neolithic bands, they don't exceed that number. That's where that number came from. And the empathy, what Bob and what Little Englander were talking about of this, do we feel guilt, or do we feel an obligation to help and to care? And I think, of course, we do. Our brains are wired that if you were in a group of 150 and you saw suffering near you of your band, you would want to help. Our brains are also geared, unfortunately, I mean, with this, our brains are geared that if you saw a threat to your band from another band, your brains are very much geared to defend and have a battle and a war and win that war, if possible, with that other band to control resources. And we've been on this track. If it is a transhumanist track, we can call it that. We've been on this and improving our abilities, improving our artifice to the stage where we are now, where we are able to control, as you say, 85% or 90% of all biomass, or maybe it's 97% of all animal, non-human mammal biomass is animals that we maintain. We've killed the vast proportion of the wild kingdom now. And it may be that when this system crashes, it will likely be when it crashes, that's final. There's no other empire going to sail in and replace us. There's no other human order. But I would just say that to the many lines of discussion we've opened, that we are not geared to feel more than an obligation to help a very small local number of people. And we are presented with images and with narratives and with scientific discoveries and facts about how dire the threat is to the planet and to now our species. And so we can't help but feel guilt or a sense of obligation. But I would counsel, as I think Going South has said and others, is be aware that this is your natural and I think laudable, originally laudable desires to care are now twisted by a scale of population that your brain was never geared to care for or to feel obligated to help, and is physically, in all senses, impossible to influence or help on that scale. So those are just some reflections, if you will, with a Greek chorus playing in the background saying, and yes, we still, with all this artifice, we don't know why we're here. It's a tragedy, as all the great Greek tragedies are. The chorus and the audience know things that the players don't know. And we are the humans. We are our own chorus and our own audience. And we're barely, only a few of us are even picking that up. The awareness of awareness of awareness. So that's just a meditative response. I don't know what that will spark in your reply.
I mean, well, I'm thinking of the phrase "lost in translation" because it is. I completely agree with the previous threads that yes, it was the alien cortex. As a biologist, to me, it wasn't like a moment or something that happened in civilization. It was an actual mutation. It was the moment, the time when that brain matured enough suddenly to have that processing power, whether you want to call that a mature, alien cortex or whatever you want to call it. It was a biological, coming of age in a way that was transhuman, in that sense that we now were able to form these huge empires, these huge civilizations. Our processing power increased dramatically, and I really like that you mentioned, how we are wired to work in smaller groups, because this is how we got lost in translation. Because obviously we now, I live in a city of 10 million people almost in London that supposedly functions well despite all the crime. And, you can argue whether it actually functions or if it doesn't function. But again, going back to capitalism, I mean, this is how we were able to form bigger groups, because capitalism is not only an economic system. Capitalism is also a religion. It gives people things to aspire to, things to believe in. And like all religions, it is both good and evil. It unites people under an idea, an abstract idea, and that can transcend a group from 150 people to 150 million people united by religion or by, I don't know, a football team or whatever you want to call it. And this is an argument that was developed by this guy in his book Sapiens, that basically our transhuman moments, Mr. Yuval Noah Harari. Our transhuman moment really was the fact that it wasn't about resources anymore. It was completely abstract. We could talk about ideas, and this would unite people. We could invent abstract notions such as money, and this, which is completely crazy. It's completely abstract. I mean, there's no value to money unless everyone believes in it. So it was a common belief that united everyone, and it can either unite them for a good cause or it can unite them against each other. Entire countries of, 180 million Russians against 45 million Ukrainians. So yeah, I completely agree with you that it was a transhuman moment, and that's when it happened.
Yeah, but it's not just I don't think it's just not just an event. It's absolutely right. It's a transhuman moment. That is definitely sure. But I think that, I mean, that is purely theoretical, and I'm not no proof of what I'm saying. But I imagine that in our evolution from the early human from the bonobo to the early human and to Homo sapiens, the appearance of this little part of our cortex on the left side was probably perceived, but did not dominate and was not the master of the people. And as Jason said, small groups, plenty of food, plenty of time, a life that was, I'm not going to picture an ideal time of the hunter-gatherer, but the conditions for the alien cortex to run amok appeared probably gradually, and we had, I'd say, in the past ways of controlling this dangerous, clever, controlling entity that we had in our brain. And I'm certainly sure that there was some shamans or some people who had the ability to make people see this thing. And I mean, in the past, we know well that it has been referred to in India and various other philosophies, even in Zen philosophy. So I think it's the way more that the master, when it became the master, and that is the moment of the mirror. That is the moment where the mirror broke, as Going South said, that brought us bad luck for a long, long time. And the transhuman peeping suddenly, coming out suddenly, the little transhuman virus was starting to appear. I'm sorry, I'm a bit sick, so I don't know if you follow what I'm saying, because I'm a bit confused. But you got me?
I follow it. I mean, I follow. I think what we're trying to, I guess, maybe determine is whether there was an actual moment. And I think what you're questioning is almost the question behind that is, were we always evil, or did it happen at some point? I'm not sure if, I think it's a combination of yes, there was a moment, because it is a biological event, the alien cortex. It was a process in evolution, but also it takes a while for that to get hold of a society, because capitalism and religion and politics basically exploited the alien cortex. And it took a while for those systems to develop. But once they did, they basically held us hostage up to today, because they are extremely efficient in controlling us. That's my kind of view on it.
George, did you ever see a Hughs video on Globeki Tepe?
No.
Oh, we should send you that. Okay, so basically in that video, he pretty much lays out what he thinks happened with the alien cortex getting the control. So what they were doing, so Hugh's interpretation of Göbekli Tepe was people. So it's a temple complex, but back then the temple was also basically the government, the treasury, the marketplace, all that stuff combined. So people, it was like a, a big festival, and they were trading there in that settlement. And that trade was denuding the landscape already. They were killing all the animals, and they were using stone, what is it, stone arrowhead heads, or was it stone axe heads as the currency? And so he said when you start trading, they did that for like 1,000 years, and that's boosting the evolution of the alien cortex in the marketplace.
Mm,
Getting the dopamine feed going. So
mm.
I think it's with settlement that this happens, that you can't settle. So when it comes, yeah, because you're getting larger than Dunbar number of people gathered there trading. So it's literally like the modern market square. And I've also read this phenomenon because I was really big in the wolf biology. Occasionally, wolves will form what's called super packs. So 100 to 400 wolves will get together occasionally, and that has the obvious effects of killing lots of prey and causing hunger. But the thing is the wolves, once the hunger starts, they start fighting and they break up back into normal packs and disperse. They don't have the ability to knuckle down and trade and build armies and stuff and farm. So that's what we could have been doing, because in a lot of ways humans are more like wolves than apes, because we run our prey down, we need to eat more meat. And think of like wolves settling down, building armies and farming. Like it's the same thing really. So they don't have the cognitive ability to lie to each other and to, knuckle down in that settlement and stay there. Yeah. And so I think part of the wisdom is, yeah, we can't be sitting in a place trading and farming. We have to move if the food gets scarce.
Yeah, and this is where the alien cortex, or whatever you want to call this, evolutionary miracle or not, that was our brain, allowed us to do. Like I was saying earlier, um, it's a survival skill, and it was selected by evolution. It was selected to enable us to, first and foremost, source food in a more efficient way. And when we were able to, create tools and create industry, I mean, in the 18th century, you can see the population in Northern Europe, how it just shot up as products were mass produced in factories. Essentially, this resulted in the mass production of humans. And this is a conversation I had with Lord Hugh when he explained to me his view of how we are being farmed. And he doesn't mean it literally, but how he has these conversations with you, and he tries to make you think that he's being literal because he wants to almost kind of piss you off. I
Yeah.
kind of, and he does piss me off when he does that, but I completely got what he meant. We're not being farmed by a system. Uh, we are by some people sitting in a government. It's not a conspiracy. We're being farmed by this capitalist system that is now able to kind of think on its own. It doesn't need any shaman or politician or economist or banker to drive it. Capitalism is unbelievably self-perpetuating because we all depend on profit, on our salaries. It is a plague. and yeah, we're farmed.
Did Hugh ever talk to you about trade itself? So yeah, basically capitalism itself is the algorithm of trade, and trade is a zero-sum game, because even the word ratio, it means like a scale. So basically in trade, you're literally just trying to screw your customer pretty much, even from back in the ancient days. Trade, if your life is completely based on trade, it's a zero-sum game. Like every day we go and we have to, buy and sell each other in the marketplace every day for goods and services. And that's all alienation and stuff. So it's like, yeah. And then on the big scale, the algorithm of capitalism itself is that zero sum game. It's a
Yeah.
digital algorithm of trade.
I call it a death cult.
Yeah.
We call capitalism a death cult because it relies on putting an expiration date on everything. because the minute
Yep.
you do that, then you can sell more and more of this stuff, because all these puppies, they die very soon. So all products need to die, and all products need to be consumables. So nothing can be eternal, nothing. So we've made Earth a product, and that's why Earth will die during this mass extinction, this collapse, because of capitalism. Capitalism needs Earth to die, because if Earth doesn't die, then you can't sell it in the market. It's we've applied this to everything. With everything that we've taken from Earth, we've put basically price tags on it so that it can be sold. And we didn't realize that in the end we would become products ourselves.
Yeah,
We became products of the same system that we created to steal from each other and to steal from nature.
yeah, and it's like we all know that the best parts of life you can't put a price tag on, but even capitalism's trying to invade in the best parts of life and put a price tag on it. Or even, with the data mining, they're basically like putting price tags on your consciousness too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why, like, I agree. Have you ever read Freddie Perlman's book called Against History, Against Leviathan? His whole hypothesis in that book is civilization is completely inhuman, and its goal is to annihilate all life on the planet. So yeah, he saw it. He used Zoroastrianism as a metaphor, and so like the force behind civilization is Ahriman, the darkness that's trying to destroy all light, and light is all the wild animals and free humans from civilization.
But
So
I
I thought
agree
that
with
was,
that. I do
yeah.
think that civilization and the systems that support it, the stock market and, our supply chains, money, just is something that sits above humanity, and it stops it from becoming self-aware. Um,
Yeah, it's
I
it's
agree with that.
blinding people. It's like Hugh talked about Ernest Becker a lot, and part of the reason why civilization got started was because of humanity's death anxiety, where normal shamans were trying to help people get over their death anxiety without, fake stories helping them become self-aware. These fake shamans during Göbekli Tepe, according to Hugh, took over and used death anxiety to sell us stuff.
Now
And
you're
so,
really talking my language, because I know that this is a conversation that me and Hugh passionately shared. We were both admirers of people like Sheldon Solomon and Gabor Mate, who talk about anxiety and the fear of death, and how and I completely agree. And my version, and I don't know if that rhymes with other things, is that it is all because of a fear of death. Our fear of death increases our anxiety to survive, to hoard things and resources, and the more we try to deal with our fear of death, basically, by killing everything around us. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but if you really think about it, think about all those, I don't know, newly rich people that buy the cars and the houses and all that. I mean, they are just completely uh, they're
yeah,
trying to convince themselves that they are immortal. They're trying to defeat death. They think that by owning things, they will live forever. This is
so the funny thing about that is, one of my favorite lines from that Against History book is Freddie Perlman even says that living things die, like oral history can die, but death itself never dies, and that's what civilization is. That's the psychic realm of it. Becoming death and destroying everything gives you this fantasy that you'll never die.
brilliant. Yeah, I've written a couple of essays on that exactly. Um, it is the death cult that is actually helping us push the thoughts of death away. It is it's very ironic, isn't it? And of course, the more you feel that you are overpowering nature, the more that you feel invincible, that you have no predators, the more you feel like you've defeated death itself. Um, it's I think it's a side effect of, and this is something that I think is worth spending a couple of minutes on, because we talked about the alien cortex, we talked about, our, supercomputer intelligence, but as you know, the people who have been the most intelligent are also people who have had tremendous mental disease. And as a biologist, I can understand that, because the minute you build a supercomputer, you increase the risk of viruses emerging and of little problems emerging with that supercomputer. And this is where, humans have all these psychoses. It's because they've got this big brain, and this big brain is able to create its own reality. It's able to fool itself. I think self-deception is maybe probably one of our worst traits. The fact that we can, deny climate change. It, you know, with this massive brain, you would think people would wake up.
Well,
It's exactly because they have this massive brain that they are able to delude themselves. And this is where, whether you want to call it alien cortex, or, our intelligence, or, it's
Well,
becoming.
I'm not even sure if that's the case. I think it's just that one part of the brain got complete control over everything, and that is our problem. I think the opposite, that we're not using all the elements of our psyche in balance. Because if we were, we'd be thinking about shit like, oh, we should probably not be overpopulating the planet, taking the big picture view. But most people are taking the small picture view because we're indoctrinated to emphasize the abstract parts of our brain. And so, yeah, it's
Hmm.
out of balance. Like I posted like a week ago, an artist called William Blake. He wrote poetry about these things called the four Zoas, and how basically he interpreted the Christian myth as, Yahweh, um, Yahweh as reason. So when reason comes to take ascendancy, that's like the demiurge creating this shitty universe that is civilization. So yeah.
but the shitty thing called civilization is the child of the alien cortex. It's the meta alien cortex. It's the Moloch. It's the beast.
Yeah,
It is that basically we are that part. Our little part of that brain has created this huge monster.
yeah,
And
it's
yeah,
trapped in duality. It wants to create a world where there's eternal life with no death, light with no darkness, joy without pain, happiness without suffering. It wants one side, and so it's trying to use one side to destroy the other. And when you do that, you annihilate everything. It's doing the pure negation. It's death itself.
negation of balance. The negation of balance. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. It's perfectly worded, and it sounds so abstract, but once you think about it, it's not.
George, I don't know if the group wants to go on a slightly new tack, but I'll just propose sort of one or two things. You have been public with your views and have been interviewed, I don't know how many hundreds of times, by various different groups. Let's put them in buckets. I think you've had some interviews with mainstream media outlets. You've had some great conversations and interviews with, if you will, fellow pundits and thinkers in the broad sort of camp of abrupt climate change, people who are willing to have these discussions. So that would be Lord Hugh and many others. Sam Mitchell. I don't know if you've had chats with people like Paul Beckwith or with others, but probably a long list that I've not watched every one of your interviews. So those are two buckets: mainstream media, and then fellow pundits, and then I guess everyone else. And I wonder if you have any reflections on your journey and your experience of being interviewed on these topics by so many people, and what has been your, if you will, your ethnographic or anthropological reflections on this experience of yours. Would love to hear that.
Is that directed at me?
Yes, George. You're the one who's been interviewed by all these people. I'm wondering what you think.
I haven't been interviewed by Paul Beckwith. I really admire him, very much so. He's my super geek. Sam Mitchell is amazing. I watch his videos all the time. I'm really addicted to the Collapse Chronicles. So your question is, what has my experience been with being? It's actually exhilarating every time I get on these calls, because I feel like I'm kicking my alien cortex. It's almost kind of becoming alive.
What have you noticed? I'm not asking for specific names, but for example, the mainstream media, have you done any interviews with mainstream media entities, and how have those gone, and what have you noticed in the aftermath of those?
I actually haven't done anything with mainstream media. I'm still pretty much in the kind of doomosphere of things. I haven't had anything with a news network or something that a medium that kind of reaches a sort of mainstream general public audience. All the channels that have interviewed me are pretty much, like Environmental Coffee House, Blackberry News.
Right.
It's always been within the kind of hardcore, let's say, climate awareness society. So far, at least, unless I'm forgetting something. Yeah, but I mean, it would be really interesting, because I would feel nervous about having a conversation with the mainstream media. I would probably be asked questions like, "Why are you an eco-fascist?" Or why? It's like silly stuff like that, yes. Or right. What is the alien cortex a cult?
Of course.
What is that? Are you guys from Earth? What do you want from us? So yeah.
What's your thoughts on Extinction Rebellion and what happened there? I mean, I've kind of been out of the loop on a lot of stuff, which is kind of weird because we were in the loop for a long time. The others in the group might know more, but I just wonder what your take is on all of that, and also, I mean, now that we are literally staring down the barrel of a gun or a brick wall with this economic calamity, which is coming very fast. Do you think that the powers that be, I mean, the climate agenda, it's kind of, I feel like with the latest Davos and the WEF, the World Economic Forum, it's still there. They've got designs on how they wish to run our lives into this absolute dystopian vision. I don't want to be too black-pilled, but I have grave misgivings on the power that they gained during the pandemic and how that plays out in terms of them controlling our lives in the future with respect to resources and this kind of managed extinction nightmare that Hugh often talked about. But yeah, anyway, sorry, just maybe the Extinction Rebellion, and then what your thoughts are.
Extinction Rebellion came at a time where the environmental movement had been corporatized and greenwashed for decades. So they played a pivotal role in galvanizing people who had completely lost hope, who were in the environmental movement for a while. And I think the way that they did that is by being completely telling it like it is. And I mean, their three demands, which of course will never be met, are quite uncompromising, which is something that I admire. So,
Do you think where the movement went with Roger Hallam kind of splitting off and trying to do that Burning Pink thing in London? I mean, we tried to have some interaction with him, and unfortunately, Hugh kind of gave up, and then Hugh died, and unfortunately, it then turned out that Roger was willing to sort of work with him, which was rather a shame. But yeah, I just wonder. I mean, do you think it was? I kind of feel like there was controlled opposition there, and as soon as they started trying to like appease government, it just seemed like it was just completely all a joke, really. At that point,
it's not
a radical. But
I mean, obviously they got hold of quite a bit of funding at some point. I know initially they were kind of squatting out of a building out in, I don't know, Shoreditch or whatever. And then they like all organizations, they need to still run on capitalism, on money. So, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I credit them, like I said, for bringing a new awareness, for telling it like it is. I admire Roger Hallam for his uncompromising position. I don't think, flying drones in Heathrow was the smartest thing to do. It's kind of like a bit, are you just going to make people angry? But they did manage to get the UK Parliament to declare climate change, climate crisis, an emergency. I mean, who has ever achieved anything like that? Which is, I mean, again, it's only on paper, but they actually, the level of the shift of what they talked about, the Overton window that they wanted to shift, they shifted that for a while. And then what happened was what always happens in human history, which is once you shift the Overton window, what happens is that the larger window changes. And now you need to shift it more because people have normalized Extinction Rebellion, whether as okay, they're the crazy guys around the block. So it's not a shocker anymore. And then on top of that, you had the people that were now looking at them as terrorists. So, and they are aware of that. And they have been always thinking of, what is the next day? What is our next action? How is our next action going to be able to achieve things? And I mean, I've watched a lot of Roger's videos in terms of his sociological theory about what brings about a revolution, which is what he studied in King's College. And the guy has a strong view and a plan on what changes. And his theory was that 2% population becoming aware is enough to start a French Revolution. So he really genuinely tried to what I liked about Extinction Rebellion was the way that they framed the urgency. They were actually the first environmental movement to come out and say, we're not going to tell you we're saving the planet. We're here to tell you we're fucked.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, that argument in the early stages was very powerful. I think that's what got so many young people. And I think in the early stages, I was very close to to joining, to quitting my job and really joining all that. But I very quickly realised that I just felt like some of the arguments were rather naive, just because of the way they were appealing to government. And now I feel as though they've really gone and shot. I mean, the idea of protesting and getting lots of people to protest, I think Hugh came to that realization that rapidly it was just trying to tip this balance and get large numbers of people out to do what is never going to work. I don't think that was the right strategy in the end. I think in the early stages it maybe had merit to raise awareness, but now what's happened is they've brought in this crime policing bill, and basically you're going to get arrested if you try and protest at anything. So we've lost more freedoms than ever through the pandemic, and then now you're not going to be able to. I mean, those kind of laws. I don't know what the latest is on it, but it looks. I mean, it's just really draconian. It's kind of backfired in that way. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll be able to look into organisations much more easily now. I mean, if you're a real cynic or a black pill, you'd say, well, come on, there was bad actors in there all along. It's like always happens with these. I mean, it happened with the Black Panthers, didn't it, in the 60s? You know, turned out most of them were all they were all feds, weren't they? A load of them that were.
This is where I feel guilty sometimes, because you look at the Black Panthers and you look at what's her name, Angela Davis, is it, who is now basically considered the most, one of the heroes of American history. She was a Black Panther, and she was completely uncompromising and went to prison and made a statement. And I don't know if she was even on death row at the time, but I mean, it just you have to take, and this is what I guess I admire in Roger, the fact that he fights for things, but it's not for everyone, and it wasn't for me. And at the time, for example, I was like you. I went to a couple of the protests, and I protested with them. I still have the stamp of the Extinction Rebellion on a couple of my T-shirts, and I felt that something was not clicking at certain times. I did sense sometimes a bit of hopium. And now, as you say, I wouldn't say they're colluding with the government by any stretch of the imagination, but like you say, the arguments, I guess, of trying to win the system by being the system maybe is not, it is actually contradicts slightly how they started, because they started kind of almost from a very kind of extreme end of like, I'm just going to tell it like it is, which this is what grabbed my attention. I couldn't believe it was happening. I was just completely over enthused in the first days of Extinction Rebellion. I'm like, could this actually take off? Because they're telling people that we're fucked, and the parliament is listening to them. I guess we live in the UK, which is the most, after the US, the most corporatized and predated upon by marketing society. And Extinction Rebellion may have been diluted by process and PR, and it's sad, but I still want to believe in them, because there isn't really that much else out there. So I can't say bad things about them. I just can't, especially for Roger and Gail. I have a lot of admiration for them. They gave up things that I couldn't give up. At the time, for example, I wasn't a British citizen yet, so I was afraid to go out to protests, and I put my name on the list for jail support. You know what they have? They have people standing by that can go.
Yeah. That's
people
very noble of you. Yeah. I mean, I will be honest. I didn't actually go to any of the, but I did go to the initial meetings, because they had these groups of people that went all around the country, to local town halls and gave meetings, and I was seriously considering, and it was an exciting time. You're right. But yeah, I think the problem, I feel with protest, I went to the Iraq war protests in the UK back in 2001 or whenever it was, or 2002. And that was the biggest protest ever in UK history. And it made no difference. The UK government, they went to war. So the idea that the people en masse, I'm deeply black-pilled on that. The idea that the people there can ever be some mass revolution, I just don't buy it.
Well, I mean,
Unfortunately,
this is why I'm a dreamer, because I don't believe that we'll be able to wake up enough unless suddenly tomorrow the electricity just went off.
no,
And
I think the only thing that could help is to collapse the system, like lone wolves or people that can take radical action. And I mean, I support all the government's actions that they've done. I'll just say that now. I'm not advocating for any kind of terrorist actions, but in history, that's proven that you need maybe like a small cohort of elites that can overthrow a rebellion, to overthrow the powers that be, if you want to maybe have some kind of action to crush the system. But at the moment, the leaders are so bad, I think they're actually going to crash the system on their own without anyone needing to do anything. So that's kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny enough because I remember Hugh wanting the Extinction Rebellion to be more extreme and to advocate more strongly a type of kind of dead strike, which they eventually kind of semi-supported it. They tried.
Yes, that was a really good idea.
And Hugh was like really for that. But it's funny. Now it's happening. The economic system is collapsing, so it's happening by itself.
Yeah, that strike, I got happy about that too, because in a way that would be good, because it gets it'll be hardship, of course, like the Great Depression, but it would get the market out of your way, the cage of the market away from you, and then human beings can start to create something from the ground up. So theoretically, that is.
Yeah, redefining wealth and degrowth and all of that, which requires.
But there was also the issue of nonviolence that was very much in the debate between Hugh and Extinction Rebellion, because I mean he didn't subscribe to this kind of credo of Gandhi and this type of attitude, because he was saying that nothing ever happens in humanity for liberation and freedom without violence. I mean, I'm not an advocate of violence by any means, but we have to be realistic. And he thought that non-violence was a strategy of capitalism, really, to control these movements, and that the violence of the system is so strong that it's nearly not seen, and what we call non-violent, So that was at the center also of his critique. This non-violent thing, which is we're not talking about killing people, we're talking about this kind of, we will not do damage, we will not, that was from the start, that was wrong. I agree with that. I agree.
I think the other thing to remember is, as well, we're just the little UK, and I think really what Hugh was advocating was to Roger was that ultimately you need to get America and China on board, and they are just such behemoths. If the UK just suddenly all stopped, emitting fossil fuels, and everyone just stopped doing everything and disconnected itself from the economic system, which is never going to happen, it wouldn't make any difference, because you need China and America on board to just completely stop burning coal and making things and doing this whole crazy project. So his idea was like, and that was why he was a bit frustrated in the end. He was just like, well, Roger, you need to go to America. You need to go underground. You need to go online and and wake people up there. Which I definitely, yeah, he had such good insight, and I think that's very true to say.
I just wanted to say that we're coming to the 2 hour. Well, it would soon be the 2 hours mark, so there will be another interval where I'll have to record again. Do you want to wrap up? Because George, you might have some things to do. We're completely easy, but
I'm easy as well. I've paid my dues to the capitalist system today. I've worked enough, and this is kind of my way of getting back. But it depends on how other people feel.
I have one question on that, George. You, if I'm correct, you have kept a job because, and you can speak to the reasons, but others have referred to, the concept of once you come to this realization, these forms of awareness, many people think, where they start to think, well, the obvious thing I should do is quit everything, quit my day job, quit everything, and make a radical change. And many have gone off in that direction. As you've encountered, again, you've been interviewed, you say, mainly by other people in the sort of collapse arena. And you've probably had conversations with many individuals who relatives, friends. How do you handle the discussion around what to do on a very individual basis when people come into this awareness? And in your own case, what discussions did you have to have with yourself to navigate what you do on a daily basis?
Discussions with myself or with other people close to me?
Either, whichever is worthier of comment.
So it's interesting. Actually, my family has been surprisingly collapse aware. I never thought it would happen. So maybe it was because they were exposed to some of my writing, but there are, believe it or not, other people in our extended family who are also either scientists or come from other areas of knowledge that that have kind of come to my rescue and kind of sort of supported my kind of alerted conversations when I did dare to say to things, in passing, when you're in a kitchen and you say, God knows how long for we're going to still have orange juice, So those conversations have gone surprisingly well with my family, but I think that I'm just lucky. I've been able to have conversations with my sister, for example, about antinatalism and my views. At some point I had a fight with her husband, but then he came around as well. I mean, it's just it's kind of, if you really want a good fight, that's the best topic, because the arguments for and against are just completely fascinating. How it's all about how you look at it. If you look at it from a human-centered perspective, then yes, I do have the right to have children. It is a human right. So, yeah, it's a lonely path to be aware for all of us who are in this group, but there are more than 8 people out there who are at different stages of aware of our climate predicament, our overshoot predicament. And the way that I personally deal with the the contrast between my doomer life and my, my normal person out there in society and in the workplace self is I have no other choice but to live this dual life. I work to pay my rent, knowing that I am supporting some company out there who, who knows what sort of supply chain they're in and what traceability um, of their supply chain, where it ends up in some sweatshop in Africa. But this is our whole system. The entire system is like that. There's very little kind of ethical pockets within this economy because everything is monetized, even things like healthcare, which is the area where I work. I work in healthcare, but I work often with